They snapped the cuffs on my wrists like I was some kind of felon. All for what? Holding a fishing rod on my land. I could feel the metal biting into my skin, while two deputies stood there stone-faced like I'd just robbed a bank. The worst part, it was my first week in this so-called dream home. The call came from my neighbor, a woman named Eleanor Briggs, who strutted around like she ran the entire county. She'd been HOA president for 20 years, and now she was pointing at me like she'd caught a serial killer. "He's stealing from our community lake," she shrieked. Community lake, I bought this 18-acre property, fair and square, every penny earned, after 2 decades of grinding as a construction foreman. The centerpiece was a 5-acre lake, my escape from the chaos of city life. But try explaining that to a woman who thinks bylaws outrank property deeds. One glance at Eleanor and I knew this wasn't about fish. This was about control. And the moment those cuffs clicked, I promised myself one thing. If she wanted a war, she just got one. The drive to the county jail felt surreal. I sat in the back of the squad car, hands cuffed, staring at the fishing rod they tossed on the floor like it was evidence in a homicide case. Through the window, I could see my property disappearing behind me, the house I'd worked 22 years to afford, the lake I'd dreamed of since childhood. All because Eleanor Briggs decided to play queen of the neighborhood. When we got to the station, Officer McCarthy, mid-50s mustache that looked like it belonged in an old Western, escorted me inside. He sighed like a man who'd been through this rodeo before. "Son," he muttered, "what the hell did you do to make that woman so mad?" I let out a humorless laugh. "I went fishing." He chuckled under his breath and shook his head. "Figures. They booked me, took my fingerprints, even made me sit for a mugshot. For fishing. By the time they released me, no charges, just a warning I'd wasted half a day and had a headache that could split concrete. When I finally got back home, the first thing I noticed was Eleanor parked in her shiny golf cart at the edge of my driveway, arms crossed, smirk plastered on her face like she'd just won the lottery. "Enjoy your day, criminal," she sneered. I didn't reply. I just walked past her, my blood boiling, but my brain already working overtime. I'd dealt with bullies before, and one thing I knew, bullies love two things: attention and control. The first I could take away. The second, I was about to rip it right out of her hands. That night, I called my buddy Tyler, a tech guy who'd helped me set up security systems back in the city. "I need cameras," everywhere, I told him, "and I need them yesterday." By noon the next day, I had 8 motion-activated cameras covering every inch of my property, all feeding live footage straight to the cloud. If Eleanor wanted to play dirty, I'd have receipts. Sure enough, it didn't take long. 2 days later at 6:10 a.m., I was sipping coffee on my dock when I heard the familiar hum of Eleanor's golf cart. She screeched to a stop so hard the tires skidded on the gravel. "What now?" I muttered, hitting the record button on my phone. "You're trespassing," she barked. I nearly spit out my coffee. "On my own land. This lake belongs to the Oakwood Shores community. We've managed it for decades. You can't just claim it because you bought a plot." I held up my deed. "Not a plot, Eleanor. 18 acres paid in full. And that Lake Dead Center." Her face turned a shade of red that would make a fire truck jealous. "Forgery. You think a piece of paper makes you king? I'll have the law on you so fast your head will spin." "Already tried that," I said calmly, nodding toward the cameras. "Didn't stick, did it?" She froze when she saw the blinking red light. Then without another word, she whipped out her phone and started dialing. 3 guesses who she called. 30 minutes later, 2 patrol cars rolled up. Different officers this time. Younger, nervous. Eleanor launched into a performance worthy of an Oscar. "He's stealing our fish. He's draining the lake. I saw him dumping chemicals in the water." The rookie's eyes went wide. "Sir, is that true?" "Check for yourself," I said, gesturing to my bucket empty because I'd barely started fishing. They did. Of course, nothing. They left apologetic but powerless. "She's the HOA president," one whispered. "We have to respond when she calls." That was strike 2. By the 5th false call in less than 3 weeks, each one crazier than the last, I realized this wasn't going to stop. She accused me of poisoning the ecosystem because I used worms for bait. She claimed my folding chair was an illegal structure requiring permits. And the kicker, she told the cops I was hosting a terrorist meeting because I had 2 friends over for a cookout. Every incident I live streamed. Every accusation I documented. My audience grew from a few curious locals to hundreds, then thousands, then hundreds of thousands. People couldn't get enough of the saga of the fishing felon. Memes exploded. Donations started pouring in enough to cover legal fees if it came to that. But it wasn't the internet fame that changed everything. It was what happened one quiet evening when a man named Hank, 70 years old with a beard that could hide a small family of squirrels, knocked on my door. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, lowering himself onto my porch swing, like his knees had been through 2 wars. "You're the guy from the North End, right?" I asked. 40 years, he said with a grin. Then his face turned serious. "You need to watch your back. Eleanor ain't just petty, she's dangerous." I frowned. Dangerous how Hank leaned in, lowering his voice like we were in a spy movie. HOA got a federal grant, 800 grand for flood prevention 3 years back. Supposed to fix the drainage, reinforce the levee? You know what we got instead? New stop signs in Eleanor's brand new Cadillac. Roads still wash out every spring. I felt my stomach drop. "You're saying she stole the money," Hank shrugged. "I'm saying it vanished. And people here? They're scared of her. She's got friends in high places, lawyers on speed dial. Folks whisper she's got the county clerk in her pocket." That night, sleep was out of the question. I sat at my kitchen table laptop, glowing, digging through county records, HOA budgets, anything I could find. And around 3 in the morning, I hit pay dirt, a federal flood prevention grant for $800,000 marked incomplete, funds dispersed, $125,000 accounted for. The math wasn't hard, $675,000 missing. Gone. I stared at the screen, adrenaline flooding my veins. Suddenly, Eleanor's obsession with my lake made sense. This wasn't about fishing. This was about leverage, power, and maybe something bigger than either of us realized. That was the moment everything changed. 2 days after uncovering that missing $675,000, I woke up to the sound of sirens, 3, maybe 4 of them, coming down my driveway like I'd just declared war on the state. My heart dropped. I hadn't done anything wrong, but that didn't matter. When the law shows up with lights blazing, you know it's about to get messy. I stepped out onto my porch, coffee mug still in hand, and saw Eleanor standing there at the property line like she was directing traffic in a war zone. She had on yellow rubber gloves, a plastic face shield, and a gas mask dangling from her neck. Beside her was a folder so thick it looked like a college textbook. "He's poisoning our water supply," she screamed before the deputies even got out of their cruisers. "He's using biological agents. This is an act of terrorism." I almost laughed, but then I saw the look on the rookie's face, the same rookie who'd been here before, and realized he was actually writing this down. "Ma'am," the lead officer said, exhaling like a man who wished he'd stayed in bed. "What makes you think that?" Eleanor pointed at my bait bucket like it was filled with uranium. "Those worms, earthworms, carry E. coli, salmonella parasites. He's contaminating groundwater. Call in hazmat before it's too late." "Ma'am," the officer said, slowly peering into my bucket, "those are fishing worms. From the bait shop. People have been using them for 100 years. Her face twisted with fury. "Are you a biologist? An environmental scientist?" "No, then don't tell me what's safe." The rookie bit his lips so hard I thought he'd draw blood, trying not to laugh. I raised my phone, already live streaming. Day 17, folks. Now I'm a bioterrorist because I like fresh bait. Tune in next week when Eleanor accuses me of summoning sea monsters. The chat exploded instantly. Laughing emojis, comments like "Hot Dog Terrorist Part 2", and donations pouring in $10, $50, even $200 with the note, "Buy more dangerous worms, you menace." The officers warned her again that filing false reports was a crime, but Eleanor didn't care. She stormed off, muttering about calling the EPA in federal court. I thought maybe that would be the end of it. I was wrong. So wrong. A week later, I thought I'd outsmart her by fishing earlier, 5 a.m. No one sane would be awake then right wrong. I'd barely cast my first line when I heard the grinding whine of her golf cart. And this time she wasn't alone. Behind her were 3 patrol cars and, get this, a building inspector. A guy in an orange safety vest hopped out of his truck, clipboard in hand, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "What's this about?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. Eleanor jabbed a finger at my $25 folding chair. Unpermitted structure, illegal construction. Tear it down. The inspector blinked, then looked at the chair, then back at her. Ma'am, that's a camping chair. It has legs, she screeched. It touches the ground. That makes it a foundation. Where's the permit? Where's the architectural review? This violates code section. Ma'am, he interrupted, rubbing his temples. It's from Walmart. It folds up. It's not a structure. Oh, really? Eleanor grabbed the chair and shook it so hard she almost fell over. He sits in it every day. That makes it permanent. I turned my camera to the stream. Breaking news, my $25 chair requires a building permit. Anyone know a good chair architect? The comments went wild. Bro, build a chair fortress and charge HOA admission. Someone donated $500 labeled Permit Fund. The inspector closed his clipboard with a snap. Ma'am, this is a waste of my time. I'm leaving. The cops looked just as done, but Eleanor, she doubled down. 2 days later, 5 squad cars showed up. 5, plus the police chief. Eleanor was screaming before anyone got out of the vehicles. They're planning a terrorist meeting. Look, she held up her phone with blurry photos of me, my dog and my buddy grilling hot dogs by the lake. Those hot dogs are signals. The mustard bottle has Arabic writing. The police chief, a no-nonsense woman with steel gray hair, stared at Eleanor like she'd grown 2 heads. Ma'am, that says French's mustard. It's from Michigan. Sleeper cell, Eleanor shrieked. They're plotting something. The chief turned to me. Mr. Walker, she said, using my name like a lifeline to sanity. Are you hosting a terrorist meeting? I gestured to the grill. Just 2 hot dogs and a golden retriever, chief. Even she cracked a smile. Then she turned back to Eleanor. One more false call and you're getting cuffed. That should have scared her straight. It didn't. The chat blew up, terrorist hot dogs coming to Netflix, and the live stream hit 500,000 viewers. Donations skyrocketed. The memes out of control. Someone made a movie poster, Fishing Crimes, starring HOA Karen. But here's the thing. While all this insanity was unfolding, my research was turning up something big, something huge. The $675,000 wasn't the whole story. I found more grants, state infrastructure funds, emergency allocations, all routed through the HOA, all missing. By the time I added it up, the total theft wasn't $675,000. It was $823,000. And every penny led back to shell companies Eleanor controlled. Then came the knock on my door that changed everything. Sarah, the HOA secretary, 35 nervous eyes darting like she expected Eleanor to pop out of the bushes. She handed me a USB drive, hands shaking. Everything's on here, she whispered. 5 years of records, fake invoices, bank transfers. If you don't stop her now, she's going to claim your lake has environmental violations. She's lining up a fake inspector. Once the property's condemned, the HOA can seize it. I stared at her stunned. Why are you helping me? Because I've watched her ruin 3 families, Sarah said, tears welling up. I can't watch it happen again. That night, I plugged in the drive. Page after page of damning evidence lit up my screen, forged signatures, shell companies, even emails where Eleanor bragged about creative accounting. My live stream ended that night with 4 words that sent the internet into a frenzy. It's bigger than money. Because by then I'd figured out why Eleanor wanted my lake so badly. And trust me, folks, it was worth a hell of a lot more than fish. By the time the sun rose the next morning, my world had tilted on its axis. The evidence Sarah gave me wasn't just a smoking gun, it was an arsenal. Fake invoices to companies that didn't exist. Checks signed by Eleanor funneled into accounts under names like Briggs Consulting and Oakwood Solutions LLC. Over 5 years, more than $823,000 had vanished from grants, HOA dues, and special assessments. But the kicker wasn't the theft. It was the pattern, the timeline. Every missing dollar was calculated, and every move Eleanor made against me was part of something bigger. At 3:17 a.m., bleary-eyed and running on cold coffee, I found it the reason for her obsession with my lake. A document buried in the county planning archives proposed interstate expansion route, Phase 3. The map made my stomach clench. A thick red line cut straight through my land, my lake dead center. The state had been planning it for years. When that highway project broke ground, my property would skyrocket in value. We weren't talking six figures. We were talking millions. Suddenly, everything clicked. The harassment, the accusations, the bogus calls. Eleanor wasn't trying to protect a community resource. She was trying to force me out, make me sell cheap so she could flip the land for a payday that would make a lottery winner blush. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling, the USB drive still glowing in my laptop. This wasn't about worms or noise complaints. It was about greed, power, and she was willing to ruin anyone who stood in her way. For the first time, I felt fear curl in my gut, not for my property, but for what Eleanor might do next. If she'd stolen nearly $1 million and roped in government officials for a land grab, what were the odds she'd stop at a few false police reports? As dawn broke, I called Marcus Henderson, the only lawyer I trusted. He was a small-town guy with a reputation for being relentless when something wasn't right. "Marcus, I've got a situation," I said as soon as he picked up. "Your HOA lady again," he chuckled. "This isn't HOA drama anymore," I replied, and then I told him everything. The grants, the shell companies, the highway plan. When I finished, there was a long silence on the line. Benny said, "Finally, you realize what you're sitting on. This isn't civil. This is federal. Wire fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, hell. They could hit her with RICO if the corruption runs deep enough. So what do? We build an airtight case," Marcus said. "No leaks, no mistakes. And when we drop it, we make sure there's an audience, a big one. The plan formed fast, expose her at the next HOA meeting, live streamed to the world. But first we needed more. Dates, signatures, a trail no jury could ignore. For 3 days, Marcus and I worked around the clock, piecing together the puzzle. He subpoenaed records, quietly called in favors from old colleagues. Meanwhile, I kept up the live stream circus. Eleanor's paranoia was working in my favor. The crazier her accusations got, the more attention we drew. By day 20, my stream had 800,000 followers. News outlets were sniffing around. Memes of Eleanor in a gas mask had gone viral under the hashtag #RearRitter Fishing Crimes. Then came the message that made my blood run cold. "Final warning, sell now or regret it. No name, no number, just black text on a white background." I showed it to Marcus. "Think it's her?" I asked. "Or someone she hired," he said grimly. "Either way, keep everything documented, and don't be alone on that property if you can help it." But I wasn't leaving. This was my home, my fight, and if Eleanor wanted to play dirty, I was ready to go nuclear. The night before the HOA meeting, Sarah texted me. She's panicking, shredding documents, calling lawyers, trying to cancel tomorrow's meeting. Too late. I'd already emailed every member, every neighbor, every local reporter. The subject line, "Where did your money go?" attached a teaser slide with one number, 823 to Wellner, and the words, "Find out tomorrow." By morning, the whole town was buzzing. I could feel the tension crackling in the air as I pulled up to the community center with Marcus riding shotgun. We weren't just walking into a meeting, we were walking into a war zone. The parking lot was packed SUVs, pickups, news vans. Inside, the air was thick with murmurs. People clutched folding chairs like weapons. Some looked confused, others angry. Eleanor was already there, pacing at the front of the room, her perfect hair slightly frizzed, her blouse wrinkled, a queen whose crown was slipping. The moment she saw me, her eyes went cold. "You're not a member," she snapped. "You have no right to be here." "Funny," I said, setting up my laptop at the podium. "Neither do the 2 million people watching this live stream." Phones shot up. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Eleanor lunged for the microphone. "This meeting is canceled. Fake news, lies. Sit down," Eleanor, Marcus said, calmly stepping between us. "You're going to want to hear this." The first slide hit the projector like a thunderclap. Federal flood prevention grant, $800 housing dollars. A wave of murmurs. People shifted in their seats, remembering the grant, remembering the promises of new drainage, better levees, none of which happened. Next slide, amount spent, $125,000. Amount missing, $675,000. The room erupted. Shouts, gasps. Someone yelled, "My basement flooded last year." "Where'd the money go?" Eleanor's voice cracked as she screamed, "Lies. He fabricated those numbers." Click, bank records appeared. Payments to shell companies. deposits into accounts in her name. A Bentley purchase dated 2 weeks after the biggest transfer. You stole from flood victims, I said, my voice steady, even though my hands were shaking. While families lost their homes, you bought luxury cars. Chaos exploded. People surged forward, some crying, others shouting curses. Eleanor tried to run, but 2 deputies blocked the door. "Let me out," she shrieked. "This is harassment. I'll sue every one of you." That's when the doors opened and in walked Agent Johnson from the FBI, badge flashing under the fluorescent lights. "Eleanor Briggs," he said, calm as a stone, "you're under arrest for federal grant fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy." She froze. Then as they cuffed her, something inside her snapped. She twisted toward me, eyes blazing. "This isn't over," she hissed. "You think you won? You have no idea what you started." Her voice echoed in my head long after the agents hauled her away. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I wondered what the hell did she mean by that. The community center was still buzzing when the FBI hauled Eleanor out in cuffs. People were shouting, crying, hugging relief, mixing with raw anger. For years, they'd paid dues, trusted their HOA, believed in the illusion of accountability. Now the curtain had been ripped away, and behind it was rot. I killed the live stream after 2 solid hours. Final viewer count 2.1 million. The chat had turned into a frenzy of justice memes and donation floods. Someone even created a hashtag, hooked on justice. Marcus clapped me on the back as we stepped outside into the cool night air. "You just pulled off something I've never seen, Ben. Public accountability in real time." I wanted to smile, but I couldn't shake Eleanor's last words. "You think you won? You have no idea what you started." The next morning, reality hit like a freight train. My phone was blowing up with notifications, local news, national outlets, even a couple of morning shows wanting interviews. My name was trending on Twitter. Headlines screamed, "HOA president exposed in live meeting. 833K embezzlement uncovered. Fisherman turns whistleblower. Topples HOA in viral stream." Part of me wanted to crawl into bed and disappear. The other part knew this was a chance, not just for me, but for everyone who'd ever been bullied by an HOA drunk on power. Marcus called as I was pouring coffee. "Ben, I've got updates. The HOA board voted last night full forensic audit, immediate dissolution of the current leadership, and a civil suit against Eleanor for damages." "How much are they going after?" I asked. He scrolled through something on his end. "Between the theft amount, penalties, and breach of fiduciary duty, the total's about 1.2 million. My jaw dropped. "She doesn't have that kind of money." Marcus gave a wry chuckle. "She will when the court sees her assets. That Bentley gone. Vacation home gone. And considering the feds are building a RICO case, she'll be lucky to see daylight before retirement age." I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt exhausted, like I'd been fighting a marathon with no finish line. That night, I sat on the dock with Lucky at my feet, staring at the moon rippling across the water. For the first time since moving here, the lake was quiet, peaceful, almost like it had been before Eleanor turned my dream into a battlefield. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Mr. Walker," a smooth voice said, "this is David Peterson. I represent Mrs. Briggs." Every nerve in my body went on high alert. "She's in federal custody," I said flatly. "Not for long," Peterson replied. "And when she gets out, well, let's just say she has resources you can't even imagine." "Is that a threat?" I asked. "A friendly warning," he said, voice like silk over broken glass. "This isn't over. Not by a long shot." The line went dead. I sat there staring at the dark water, my gut twisting. Eleanor might be in a cell, but her reach, that was still out here slithering like something poisonous. The next day, the GoFundMe for legal costs hit $75,000. Reporters were camped at the end of my driveway. My live stream replay had racked up 12 million views. People were calling me a hero, a whistleblower, a symbol of standing up to corruption. And then the emails started flooding in, hundreds from strangers across the country. "My HOA fines me for planting flowers. Please tell me how to fight back. They towed my car for being an inch over the line. Can you help? We think our board is stealing dues. How do we prove it?" Somewhere between the 4th and 50th email, an idea started forming. Not just an idea, a mission. Why stop here? Why not build something bigger? A resource. A platform where homeowners could learn their rights, share evidence, fight back against power-hungry HOAs. Transparency, education, accountability, all the things Eleanor tried to bury. I called Marcus. What if we started a nonprofit, I said. Something to help people stand up to corrupt HOAs. Legal templates, advice, maybe even a hotline. There was a pause, then a slow grin in his voice. Ben, you might be on to something. I'll draft the paperwork. By the end of the week, we had a name, Homeowners United, a simple website, a mission statement. No more unchecked power. No more silent victims. Within 48 hours, thousands of people signed up. Donations poured in. Local TV ran a segment calling it the start of an HOA revolution. For the first time in weeks, I felt hope bloom in my chest. This wasn't just about my lake anymore. This was about every person who'd been threatened, harassed, or cheated by the very organizations meant to protect their neighborhoods. But just as things were settling into a rhythm, the next punch landed. Marcus called late one night, his voice tight. She posted bail. I sat up in bed. How she's facing federal charges. $500,000, he said grimly. And guess what? Her first move was filing lawsuits against you, Sarah, the HOA, even the FBI. Defamation, conspiracy, emotional distress. She's throwing spaghetti at the wall, trying to bleed everyone dry with legal fees. I rubbed my temples. Will any of it stick? Not a chance, Marcus said. But she's not playing to win in court. She's playing to drain resources and buy time. Time for what? The question gnawed at me like a hook in deep water. Over the next few weeks, the harassment ramped up. Anonymous letters, slashed tires, a dead fish left on my porch with a note. Stop now or sleep with them. I documented everything, handed it to the FBI. They promised they were closing the net. Meanwhile, my platform exploded. Media requests turned into TV spots. Homeowners United hit 100,000 members in 3 months. People started calling me the guy who beat the HOA mafia. But every time I started to breathe, I remembered Peterson's voice. This isn't over. And then came the moment that froze my blood, a news alert on my phone. Planning Commission fast-tracks interstate expansion vote. The highway project. The one worth millions. Suddenly I realized Eleanor's plan might not be dead. Not yet. And if she was still pulling strings, I had no idea how deep this went or who else was in her pocket. One thing was certain, the fight wasn't finished, not even close. When the alert about the highway project hit my phone, I didn't even hesitate. I grabbed my keys and drove straight to Mike's house, the oldest resident in Oakwood Shores, and the man who'd first warned me Eleanor wasn't just a nuisance. He opened the door in flannel pajamas, coffee in one hand, shotgun in the other. What's got you looking like a man who just saw a ghost? I shoved the phone toward him. Look, the state's voting on the interstate expansion next month, right through my lake. Mike squinted at the screen, then let out a low whistle. Well, I'll be damned. So that's why she wanted you gone. You're sitting on a gold mine, Ben. I'm sitting on a target, I muttered. Mike motioned me inside. We sat at his kitchen table under a flickering light while he spread out a stack of old county planning maps. His hands shook, but his mind was sharp as a nail. See this red line, he said, tracing it with a gnarled finger. That's phase 3. Been in the works for years. Her brother-in-law's on the commission. You think she didn't know hell? She probably picked this neighborhood because of it. The pieces locked into place like a nightmare puzzle. Eleanor hadn't been hoarding HOA dues for kicks. She'd been funding a long con. $1 million here, $1 million there, all to buy properties along that future highway route. My lake wasn't just a trophy. It was the crown jewel in her empire. Mike leaned back, eyes hard. You expose her, you think you won. But snakes like Eleanor, they've got nests. Cousins, cronies, old favors to cash in. You just poke the nest with a stick. His words echoed all night as I drove home through empty streets. I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat on my dock watching fog creep over the water, Lucky's head in my lap, thinking about how fast a dream could turn into a war. But here's the thing about hitting rock bottom. It either breaks you or it forges you into something new. And somewhere between the exhaustion and the fear, something inside me hardened. I wasn't just some guy who wanted to fish in peace anymore. I was a fighter, a builder, a man with a mission bigger than himself. The next morning I doubled down, hired a security firm, installed motion lights and cameras so sharp they could read a license plate at 200 yards, Got a concealed carry permit, not because I wanted to use it, but because I wasn't going to be caught off guard. Then I threw myself into Homeowners United like my life depended on it, because maybe it did. What started as a bare-bones site became a full-blown movement. We had attorneys volunteering to review HOA bylaws, whistleblower hotlines lighting up with tips, forums where neighbors banded together to audit their boards. Media outlets started calling me the HOA Avenger. Memes turned me into some folk hero with a fishing pole instead of a sword. Funny thing was, I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a guy duct taping his sanity together while trying to keep the wolves at bay. But every email from a homeowner who won back their rights, every message that said you gave us hope added steel to my spine. Then out of nowhere came the gut punch I didn't see coming. Sarah, brave, loyal Sarah, showed up at my door one rainy evening, soaked to the bone. She offered me money, she blurted before I could even get her inside. 50 grand, to disappear, to retract everything I said. I stared at her. How she's broke. The courts froze her accounts. Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. Not all of them. My chest went cold. You didn't take it, did you? Her eyes flashed. After everything she did, hell no. But Ben, she's desperate. Desperate people do stupid things. We stood there in silence, the rain drumming like war drums on the roof. I thought about Eleanor in some gated mansion, plotting revenge with that shark of a lawyer, about Peterson's silky voice promising this wasn't over, about the anonymous threat on my porch, the dead fish with its glassy eyes. For the first time, I realized this fight might never end, not completely. Eleanor might go down, but people like her, they'd always exist. And maybe that was okay, because now there was something standing in their way. Something we built out of spite and stubbornness and sheer refusal to roll over. Me. Us. The movement. Over the next 6 months, life settled into a strange new normal. The federal case crawled forward, Eleanor piling on motions, her lawyers twisting like snakes to delay the inevitable. Meanwhile, the FBI dug deeper and found more skeletons than a graveyard in October. Offshore accounts. Kickbacks. A paper trail that stretched across state lines. The day they added racketeering charges, I opened a beer on my dock and toasted the sunset. Not because it was over, far from it, but because for the first time in a long time, I believed we'd win. And somewhere in that whirlwind of lawsuits and subpoenas, something unexpected happened. Sarah and I, well, we stopped just being allies. Late-night strategy sessions turned into shared dinners. Shared dinners turned into something I hadn't felt in years, home. One evening, as we sat by the lake, watching fireflies dance over the water, she said softly, "You know, if she hadn't tried to destroy you, we might never have met." I looked at her and smiled, a real smile, the kind that comes from surviving hell and finding light on the other side. "Funny how life works," I said. It was more than funny. It was ironic. Eleanor's greed had sparked a chain reaction she never saw coming, a movement that would outlast her, a love she couldn't poison, and a resolve she couldn't break. And as I cast my line into the lake that night, I realized something profound. Sometimes the biggest battles aren't about winning or losing. They're about becoming someone who refuses to back down. And damn if that didn't feel like victory. The day the jury filed back into the courtroom, the air was thick with tension. Months of deposition subpoenas and sleepless nights had led to this moment. I sat at the plaintiff's table with Marcus and Sarah, my palms damp against the polished wood, staring straight ahead as 12 strangers prepared to decide Eleanor Briggs's fate. She sat across the aisle, thinner than I remembered her once immaculate hair, a dull, brittle gray. Designer suits had given way to a plain navy dress that hung loose on her frame. But her eyes, they still burned with that same calculating fire, even as the bailiff called the room to order. On the charge of federal grant fraud, the foreman said, voice steady, "We find the defendant guilty." A sharp gasp rippled through the courtroom. Eleanor flinched but kept her chin high. On the charge of embezzlement, guilty. Money laundering, guilty. Conspiracy to commit fraud, guilty. Each word landed like a hammer blow. By the time the foreman finished, Eleanor's mask had cracked. Her lips trembled, her breath coming in ragged bursts. For a fleeting second, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. The judge didn't waste time. "Mrs. Briggs, you betrayed your community's trust at the highest level. You diverted funds meant to prevent tragedy funds that could have saved lives. Your actions were deliberate, calculated, and prolonged. For these crimes, I sentence you to 8 years in federal prison. A stunned silence filled the room. Then the judge added, you will also pay restitution in the amount of $823,000 plus penalties and legal fees, bringing the total to $1.2 million. The gallery erupted cheers, sobs, applause, muffled by the gavel pounding for order. I sat frozen, a rush of relief washing over me, so strong it left me dizzy. After everything, the harassment, the threats, the sleepless nights, it was finally over. Or so I thought. As the marshals led Eleanor away in cuffs, she turned her head, eyes locking on mine. And then she smiled, a thin, cold curve of lips that sent a chill racing down my spine. Enjoy the lake, Ben, she called, her voice carrying over the din. For now. 2 words. That was all. But they hung in the air like smoke long after the door slammed shut behind her. Life didn't snap back to normal overnight. It never does after a storm like that. But slowly the pieces started falling into place. The HOA was dissolved by unanimous vote. A new board, transparent, accountable, run by people who actually cared, took its place. Sarah was elected president, though she hated the title. Call me the anti-Eleanor, she joked at the first open meeting. With court-awarded restitution and insurance payouts, the community rebuilt. Roads that had been crumbling for years finally got paved. Flood prevention systems, real ones, not just empty promises, were installed along the creek. And my lake, it stayed mine. No more phony violations, no more police lights flashing at dawn. Just quiet water and the whisper of a reel spinning outline. The media circus eventually moved on, but Homeowners United didn't. What started as a website in my kitchen grew into a national nonprofit with thousands of members. We published guides, held webinars, even launched a legal fund to help families fight back against abusive HOAs. People started calling it a movement, a push for transparency that rippled far beyond one neighborhood in one small county. Funny thing is, I never set out to start a revolution. I just wanted to fish in peace. But sometimes the smallest stand can trigger the biggest change. A year later, I sat on the same dock where it all began. Lucky snoozing at my feet, a fishing rod in my hand. The sun spilled gold across the water, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I breathed without weight pressing on my chest. Sarah walked down the dock, her hair catching the light like spun copper. Big turnout for the anniversary barbecue, she said, settling beside me. 200 people at least. Good, I said, smiling as I reeled in a modest bass. The community deserves a party after everything. She touched my arm gently. You did this, Ben. I shook my head. No, we did this. Everyone who stood up, spoke out, refused to back down. She leaned against me, and for a long time we just sat there watching the lake ripple in the breeze. The scars of the past were still there. Whispers of Eleanor's name, faint traces of tension in old neighbors' eyes, but they were fading, replaced by something stronger. Hope. But peace has a funny way of never lasting forever. The first letter arrived 6 months later, stamped from a federal correctional facility. Eleanor's handwriting was neat, precise, like nothing had changed. Ben, prison gives you time to think, too much time, maybe. I was wrong. The power went to my head. After Harold died, I needed control, and I grabbed it the only way I knew how. It started small, then it consumed me. I'm in therapy now. Trying. Maybe it's too late. But thank you for stopping me before I destroyed more lives. Enjoy the lake. It really is beautiful. E. I read it twice, unsure what to feel. Anger, pity, relief, maybe all of the above. Then a week later came another letter. Different handwriting this time. Jagged, masculine. You won. But I left you a gift in the lake. Happy fishing, M. No return address. No explanation. Just those words coiled like barbed wire in my brain. I showed it to Marcus, who called the FBI. They promised to investigate, told me to stay alert. But late that night, sitting on the dock with the moon high and silver, I couldn't stop staring at the dark water, wondering what secrets lay beneath its calm surface. Eleanor may have fallen, but something told me this story wasn't over. Not yet. And maybe that's the lesson life keeps teaching us. Victory isn't a finish line. It's a series of stands, choices made in the quiet moments when no one's watching. So I cast my line into the shadows, the reel humming softly, and whispered a promise to the rippling water. Whatever's coming next, I'll be ready. Because once you've fought for something you love, you learn one truth that changes everything. Peace isn't given, it's defended. Every single day. What started as a fight over fishing turned into the hardest, most defining battle of my life. And the lesson power unchecked will always corrupt. Whether it's an HOA president or a CEO, people who crave control will cross any line when they think no one's watching. That's why you can't stay silent. You can't let fear of retaliation keep you from standing up for what's right. I learned that transparency isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. Paper trails, recordings, documentation. Those became my weapons when lies started flying. And let me tell you, the truth doesn't defend itself. Someone has to pick up the shield. The other big lesson, sometimes the storm that wrecks your peace clears the path for something greater. Because of Eleanor, I found a mission, a movement, and against all odds, a family. Turns out the fight for justice might start with one small voice, but it echoes louder than any bully's roar. If you're facing a power-drunk HOA or any authority flexing beyond their limits, here's what you do. Document everything. Emails, calls, notices, save it all. Second, know your rights. Most HOA boards count on people being uninformed. Third, go public when necessary. Bullies thrive in the dark. Sunlight burns them. Don't fight alone. There are advocacy groups, legal aid resources, and platforms like Homeowners United ready to help. If you suspect fraud, dig deep. Public records are your friend. And when you find something, don't whisper. Speak loud, speak clear, and never back down. Because the truth, one determined homeowner with evidence, can topple an empire of corruption. And if I can do it with nothing but a fishing pole and a smartphone, so can you. If this story fired you up, hit that like button, share it with someone battling HOA nightmares, and drop "Justice Wins" in the comments. And if you want more real stories like this, subscribe now.